We are recording on March 18th, 2021, and there has been a terrible mass shooting in Atlanta. And events like this remind us why it's so important to do this work, to fight, to uproot white supremacy in our country. And it's a grave undertaking that requires all of us to participate. I'm very grateful for all of you here this evening. And I'm very grateful for our presenter tonight, my friend Ebonee, and I'll be introducing her shortly. So I'm going to begin with a short introduction to our organization, Take Part. The mission of Take Part is to confront racism and to engage in dismantling the systems that perpetuate ingrained racial inequality. We do this through events, education, and outreach that foster engagement in building a community where all people are treated with equality and respect. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the presentation of Take Part events are those of the individuals. They do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Take Part or its members. We like to have some communication agreements to keep in mind while you participate this evening. Listen more, and listen when you're uncomfortable. Engage tension, do not indulge drama. Wait, why am I talking? Consultation and collaboration, not competition. Nobody needs to win. We just are here to collaborate and learn with one another. Maintain a safe space for difficult conversations. Take away lessons learned and insights gained, and leave behind who said what. So we don't want to take gossip outside of this space. Just take the learnings. Take Part is supported by contributions from wonderful donors like you. We have the donation option in our ticketing, and we are so grateful to the people who use that. We also receive some funding from the local spiritual assembly of the Baha'is of Portland, and we are affiliated with AHA, the Association for Human Advancement and Development. All right, without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce my friend Ebonee Bell. Ebonee received her master's degree from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. She has been an Amazon Diversity Series speaker, a Multnomah County Black History Month speaker, and a speaker at the Tualatin Martin Luther King Day celebration. Noting that books have the power to change lives, Ms. Bell has dedicated her career to advancing the education of children and youth through various literacy initiatives she promotes locally and nationally. Ebonee is also a founding member of Take Part, and we are so grateful for her. Ebonee, please take it away.
I'm glad to be here tonight. Thank you to everyone who made it. I have a presentation that I'll be sharing with you tonight. Before I get started though, I want to say that this entire presentation began because I heard a lot of Black people saying, why is Black History Month in the shortest month of the year? Why is it February? And I understood that Carter Godwin Woodson was an educator. And I never believed that he had said that Black History Month should be solely in February. So when I started the research, this is not how you're supposed to do research, right? You're supposed to like be objective and not have an answer in mind when you begin your research. When I started this research, I was looking for information to confirm my theory that Carter G. Woodson had not said that Black History Month would be in February. And I found plenty. I found plenty immediately. So I want to tell you a little bit about Carter G. Woodson, and I want to show you some of the things that I found. Carter G. Woodson was born in Virginia, and he was born in 1875. I have heard people say that he was born into slavery. That is false. He was born in 1875. His parents had both been enslaved. His father had had fought in the Civil War. And he grew up on a farm with his 7 brothers and sisters who made it into adulthood. And they were very poor. And he mentions that there were times in his lives where they did not have a lot of food. And he had to work as a youth to help support his birth family. His father relieves him of obligation to the family when he's 20 years old. And it's at age 20 that he begins high school. So that is his first chance to start acquiring education, is at age 20. He graduates from high school 2 years later and becomes principal of that high school while attending college. So he has like a super phenomenal academic record. So he starts attending college in Kentucky, and then he goes on to get his master's degree immediately at the University of Chicago. In preparing this presentation, I wrote to the Library of Congress. I work at a library. I want to recommend to everyone here that if you're looking for information, special information, write to the Library of Congress. I was surprised how quickly they got this information to me. I asked them, is there any video of Carter G. Woodson? And they sent me a reply back 10 days later with a video attached. And I want to share that video with you. It is without sound, but to my knowledge, it is the only video that we have of Carter G. Woodson. So my guess is you won't be seeing this anywhere else. It is without sound, so. I'm gonna stop sharing there. That's my short video that I got from the Library of Congress, very pleased. I believe that my brother Ifeanyi put it up on YouTube. So if you're doing your own presentation, you may be able to find that video on YouTube. Were there originally words someone asked? No, this is the very manner in which I received it from the Library of Congress. So I'm not sure what he was saying, but there are plenty of quotes by Carter G. Woodson in this presentation. So you won't lack for the words of Carter G. Woodson. You already know that he was born after the end of slavery. He has a super phenomenal academic record. He did an amazing amount of academic work in a very short amount of time. And he enters Harvard in 1908. And he enters Harvard in the PhD program for history, and he becomes the second African-American to receive a PhD in history from Harvard. This is my first question for you all. Who is the first African-American to receive their PhD in history from Harvard? I see some people are already, this is an easy one. If you guess a prominent African-American man who was living at this time, you may be right. You can throw it in the chat. You can, yes, I see Brenda. You have to unmute, Brenda. Oh, and now they went away.
Frederick Douglass.
Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass.
Yes.
No, it's not Frederick Douglass. That's an excellent guess. I'm not sure what his death date is. I know Frederick Douglass, I think, was born in like 1817, and he lived a very long time. So I don't think he would have received his degree in 1912 though. I saw in the chat box somebody had the correct answer. Thank you, Jenna. That was W.E.B. Du Bois is correct. Oh, Marianne had it as well. Good job, those people who got that one correct. You will have plenty of other opportunities to get questions correct. So he will be the second African-American to get their PhD from Harvard. He is the first person to introduce the formal study of Black history, and I want to make sure that I'm understood here. He had written a book about the education of African Americans prior to 1871. So clearly he understands that there's education happening for Africans and among Africans as soon as we arrive in the United States. But his is the first formal class. So the first class that you could get credit for at a university is his. And so he gets the first African-American formal study of history. And he felt that we should study what he called Negro history year-round. And he taught elementary school students and college students. If you were a human being and you could stand up, he would teach you. There's a famous story. He was taking a cab ride and he was on a way to a venue where he was giving a lecture, and he was talking to the cab driver about what his topic was for the day. And when he got to the lecture hall, the cab driver said, do you think I could come in and listen to your talk? He was known to be a brilliant and charismatic orator. So people were captivated by him when he spoke. I'll just say he understood when he started Negro History Week for that week to be a period of time during which his students would demonstrate the knowledge that they had learned throughout the school year. Remember, he taught elementary and middle and high school and college. And so he envisioned Negro History Week as a period of time for his students to demonstrate through recitations and skits and whatever they wanted, whatever sort of things throughout the year, because he had been teaching them about Negro history throughout the course of the year. So we have changed his original vision for what Negro History Week would be. And before we begin, I want to give you guys a quiz, because of course he didn't think that you should celebrate Negro History Week unless you had done the work. And so we would have to prove to him that we have done our work and we know something about Black history if we were to be celebrating it. Let me share my screen with you. This quiz is called the Carter Quiz. You can answer as many times as you want. I will not give you a failing grade. I will not be grading you at all, so you can feel free in your answers. The Carter Quiz consists of 4 possible answers. 1, it could be Carter G. Woodson. 2, it could be Sean Carter, who is better known as, write in the chat box or raise your hand if you know. Jay-Z, says Xavier. Yes, Xavier, got it. It could be Dwayne Carter, who is better known as, write in the chat box or raise your hand if you think you know who Dwayne Carter is. For another performer. Lil Wayne, says Marianne. Yes. Or it could be former President Jimmy Carter. I will share the screen so you can see all of the possible people. Well, let's escape from here. Escape. And move on. Don't play. So these are your possible answers. We went over who each of these people are. Here's your first quote. Which Carter said, "No man knows what he can do until he tries." And I can't see you all, so hopefully you're writing in the chat box and scribbling away. Donna will tell me what's being written in the chat box. Anything in there?
No.
Everybody's afraid that I'm gonna mark them. I'm gonna mark it wrong. Give a guess.
Jay-Z.
Somebody said Jay-Z, all right.
Yep.
Any other guesses?
Dr. Carter.
All righty.
You guys, Ebonee is not going to give up on the audience participation portion.
It's not going to happen. What's going to happen is you're going to be forced to participate, and you'll be like, "Oh, okay, well." If you guessed Dr. Woodson, you were right. Here's the next quote. "You can do what you have to do, and sometimes you can do it even better than you think you can." Any guesses? Which Carter? Is it Jimmy, Dr. Woodson, Lil Wayne, or Jay-Z?
We have a vote for Jimmy Carter.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
A vote for Jay-Z.
Okay. The person who voted for former president, excellent. Those people who are voting, trying to tear down the past prohibits you from building up your future. People are like, "Oh my God, who said that? Is she gonna relent?" I'm not.
We have a few votes for Dr. Woodson.
Okay. Dr. Woodson wasn't correct. That was Lil Wayne.
You know, I was thinking it does not sound like Lil Wayne.
It was Lil Wayne. Other people don't realize Lil Wayne is an intelligent person who can say things like that. Other people said the same. The burden of poverty isn't just that you don't always have the things you need. It's the feeling of being embarrassed every day of your life, and you do anything to lift that burden. Anybody willing to hazard a guess about which Carter?
We have a vote for Jimmy Carter.
Okay.
Jay-Z. Dr. Woodson, another vote for Jay-Z.
People who said Jay-Z were correct. Good job. If you fear making anyone mad, then you ultimately probe for the lowest common denominator of human achievement.
We have a couple votes for Lil Wayne, Jimmy Carter, Dr. Woodson.
Oh, we're getting all four. If you said former President Carter, you're correct. I'm far from being God, but I work goddamn hard. I haven't had anybody who any group who someone hasn't gotten this one right. What is the chat box saying?
We have some votes for Lil Wayne and a vote for Jay-Z.
Okay. Yeah, Jay-Z continues to be known by his fans. It's hilarious. A lot of times you have a conversation with someone and he's like, "You speak so well." I'm like, "What do you mean? Do you understand that's an insult?"
Lil Wayne.
Just Lil Wayne. Okay, well, that one was Jay-Z also. How about the mere imparting of information is not education?
Dr. Woodson.
There we go. That was definitely Dr. Woodson. How about a fundamentalist can't bring himself or herself to negotiate with people who disagree with him because the negotiating process itself is an indication of implied equality.
Votes for Dr. Woodson. A vote for Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, it's the person who's going to be doing the most negotiating of the four. In the long run, there is not much discrimination against superior talent.
Jay-Z, Jay-Z.
This one is Dr. Carter Woodson. So he was arrogant. He understood that he was a superior talent, and he would tell you so in a heartbeat. So there you have one of his personality traits. I say to you quite frankly that the time for racial discrimination is over.
A vote for Dr. Woodson, some votes for Jimmy Carter.
A lot of people guessed Jimmy Carter for that one, and they're correct. There should be no indulgence in undue eulogy of the Negro. The case of the Negro is well taken care of when it is shown how he has influenced the development of civilization.
Votes for Dr. Woodson.
Yeah, he's the only one who would probably use the term Negro. I'm gonna stop my screen sharing right there. In putting together this presentation, I was looking for information about Onesimus. I understood that there had been a slave in colonial New England who had told Cotton Mather about the practice of vaccination in West Africa. I understood that, and so I was looking for an article about that situation. And I found one, and I was so happy. This was a few years back. I want to share the screen with you again so you can see the article itself. I've chopped it up so you can see it bigger. So this is an article that appeared in the Boston Globe. It's by Ted Whitmer, and he's talking about Cotton Mather's relationship to an African man whom he named Onesimus. We don't know what name Onesimus would have called himself. And the story goes that there was the fear of smallpox was enormous. Right now we have a fear of COVID-19. The fear of smallpox was much, much greater. If there is a smallpox epidemic, you can expect to lose 20 to 30% of the population. If COVID-19 had been allowed to run rampant, we would have lost 2.5% of the population. So the death tolls from smallpox would have been and were enormous. And so Cotton Mather, whom I call Cotton, I know you're not supposed to call people by their first names and you don't know them. Cotton's mother was, her surname was Cotton. Father wanted it known that he came from these two great families, the Cottons and the Mathers. And so he's given the first name Cotton, so people will understand when they meet him that he has this great heritage of these two great houses of New England. Cotton is given Onesimus, the person he names Onesimus, by his church. This is in the 1600s, the late 1600s. At that time, a lot of slaves are owned by the church. Cotton Mather was the head of the church, and so it was essentially his slave or his enslaved person. And he names this person Onesimus out of a slave in the Bible. This article is very intriguing to me. I was so pleased when I found it because it has so much interesting information and so much contradictory information. So here, Widmer is telling you about this practice of what's called variolation. And variolation is when you take a small amount of a pustule of smallpox and you cut someone else's skin open and then you put some of that disease, live virus, into another person who doesn't. And what happens is you get, if you're lucky, you get a much smaller reaction to the smallpox and you lower the death rate. So it goes from 20 to 30% to 4 to 6%. So variolation, even though there are a lot of people who are going to die of variolation, it's going to save more lives than people are going to lose lives. Note, I have in red, everything that I put in red is my emphasis. Widmer brings us his own opinion at the end of the article. Solutions to problems come from the places we least expect to find them, meaning from his perspective that he would least expect to find a solution to an epidemic coming from West Africa. So I was like, wow, he just came right on out and said that in this article in 2014. He tells us medical knowledge is still primitive, and scientists didn't know much about medical knowledge. At the same time, he's also telling you that West Africa has this practice of variolation, which is essentially an old form of vaccination, which is actually not that primitive. But anyway, he says medical knowledge is still primitive. At this time in the 1600s, yes, people could be quite virulently racist. I'm not trying to deny that, but it was also possible at this time for people to think of African people as people with souls. Cotton Mather wrote in his diary that he would not be surprised if there were African souls surrounding Christ. So he thought it was quite possible that African people had souls. And his contribution to racist thought is that he thought if African people could be introduced to Christianity, then that would be something that would help to save them. And so this is one of his justifications for slavery, was that it would introduce African people to Christ. And then he admired Africans. All of the information about Onesimus comes to us from Cotton Mather. There's no information that exists about him outside of Cotton Mather's estimation. And so unfortunately, we don't get to have Onesimus's view of Cotton Mather or what he did after this incident. But you have his answer to the question if he'd ever had smallpox. And Onesimus answers yes and no. And then he explains the process of what's called variolation, which is introducing this live virus into the population in order to prevent a larger outbreak of the disease. So at the bottom, this was information that I did not know. So at this time, people who were enslaving people, capturing Africans in West Africa, they understood that West Africans had this practice of variolation. And so someone who had the scar from being variolated could be expected to be worth more money in the slave system. That was a shocker for me. I didn't realize that. Like, this is a known practice and it was considered valuable. And when I did further research, I found that 20% of West Africans who come to the United States and are enslaved, 20% of them have been variolated. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute because I want to talk about what happened when I figured out about that 20%. 20% did not seem like a lot to me, but there is a pandemic happening now. So I have numbers to compare it to now, right? 20% variolated means 80% on. In Oregon, I believe we're at somewhere around 17% of our population has been vaccinated against COVID-19. And that 17% was hard won. It has taken monstrous effort on the part of entire health departments and volunteers and extraordinary effort to get to that 17%. So I'm saying 17th century West Africa has a variolation rate of 20%. That also would require a similar amount of organization and planning and decision-making and instruction in order to get to that. You can't just accidentally arrive at 20% of your population being variolated. There's no way to do it. You have to have a concerted effort on the part of a large group of people who are going to do this action. And in the 1700s and 1600s, this was known that this was a practice. And they also knew that this had been a practice for hundreds of years before that. So that's not in dispute, that this practice had been going on in the 13 and 1400s as well. So all of that was a major realization for me. And I was sharing this information about Cotton Mather and Onesimus with a friend. She said, "Oh, I get it now, I get it. That's the line in our textbooks. Africans were preferred for slaves and slave masters because they had a natural immunity to old world diseases." Do you guys remember that line? I was like, oh yeah, I do remember reading that in my textbook. And now I know that we did not have a natural immunity to old world diseases. What we had was a practice called variolation, which made it so that we would not be decimated by smallpox. And all of that knowledge is forgotten because we don't use variolation anymore. And why would we want to record that Africans had some elaborate organized system intelligently designed for the concerted practice of preventing people from getting smallpox? That is not a line that the 17th century or 18th century America wanted to perpetuate. In fact, if you think back to Ted Widmer's article, you'll remember that he called medical knowledge at that time primitive. Well, if we say that knowledge is not primitive, then we're having to admit that West Africans have a knowledge and a practice that supersedes what Europeans are doing at that time. Anybody tell me what, if you went to a doctor in 1700 in the United States and that doctor was European, doesn't matter what disease or what affliction you have, what are they gonna say? Universal leeches. People are saying bleeding or leeches. Exactly. Something that will definitely kill you if you do it. So I wouldn't say that all medical knowledge was equally primitive. I would say that the Europeans were, still at the beginning stages of science, and bloodletting or leeches were the common cure for all illness. And of course, it's impossible for me not to try to imagine African people arriving here and becoming ill and going to a doctor and hearing, what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut your arm and bleed you. So I would just have been floored if I had been told that. I can't imagine what they must have thought. I'll briefly take questions and I'll move on. I talk too much, so I want to give time for people to ask questions if they have any before I keep going with my never-ending slideshow.
Y'all remember, you can raise your hands or you can put your questions in the chat.
Okay, I'm gonna go on because I don't see anybody's hand up and there's no questions in the chat, so.
Okay.
So I want to show you, just so you know that I'm not making things up, the kind of language that's used to describe what we just learned was called variolation. So at the bottom of this article, you'll see, I'm going to blow it up for you. Africans had already developed immunity to European diseases. This sentence robs African people of the ingenuity, cleverness, ability to be organized and have a concerted plan, right? Because he just already had developed this immunity. This is an article that's very interesting. Carla has put it in our chat box a number of times, and I highly recommend that you read it. It's actually information about how European colonists felt about Africans. So in this, you start to understand, oh, in the 1600s and 1700s, it was possible for Europeans to regard Africans as equal human beings. In this same article, Smedley notes, in contrast to Indians, Africans also had natural immunities to old world diseases. There's that sentence from our textbooks again. And here's the thing about this sentence that I keep wondering, why are we being compared to Indians? Like, who exactly is this sentence for? Are Africans trying to beat out Indians so we can be the better slaves? Or is this for future people who are considering enslaving mass groups of people later? Why do we need to be contrasted with Native American populations? So if you'll recall, I'm going to question the use of this term natural, because natural is a way for us to not regard the intelligence and cleverness and organizational skill and concerted effort of the African people. So that's how we get rid of having to deal with a group of people who are practicing variolation as a means of trying to prevent smallpox. You just say it's natural, and then all of that goes away. I want you to let me take you back many slides. Dr. Woodson says there should be no indulgence in undue eulogy of the Negro, meaning like you shouldn't have to cry and carry on because Black people have never done anything. He says the case of the Negro is well taken care of when it is shown how he has influenced the development of civilization. And what Dr. Woodson does is he tries to give us the information, something like what Widmer was showing us in the article about Onesimus and cotton, about actual things that African people have introduced to the world civilization. And so this quote is basically the mission statement of Carter G. Woodson, I would say. I'm going to stop screen sharing. I'm going to go back to looking at the peoples again. I don't see any hands up. And to me, if you guys don't have hands up, that means I get to keep talking. so I will keep talking as long as there are no hands up and no questions in the chat box for me. Dr. Woodson was in the Philippines in 1907. He had gotten his master's degree in education from the University of Chicago. And oh, I have a question. I'm going to share this fact and then I'll get back to Adrian and Bernadette. And he goes off to the Philippines as a superintendent of teachers. And he finds that his Filipino students are uninterested in the book that he is trying to teach them to read from. The book has pictures of snow, and it has pictures of apples and pictures of houses. And the Filipino children have never seen snow, and they've never seen apples, and they've never seen houses that look like the houses in the picture. And so they don't want to learn to read or to have anything to do with this book that is of no interest to them. And that is when Woodson discovers that you need to have material that comes from the culture of the person you're trying to teach. So you can't just have some material that comes from nowhere and is not related to that person, because what interest is it to them? Why would they want to learn that? And so this philosophy is one not that he learned by teaching African Americans, but that he learned in the Philippines. All right, Adrian and Bernadette.
I just wanted to build on what you said about Blacks in medicine. I discovered a dissertation at Yale about the history of their Black doctors. And I can't pull it up right now, but there is one on eScholar, the title of which is African Americans at Yale University School of Medicine, 1810. and they identify the first doctor as Dr. Creed. But what I remember in the dissertation was he was able to go into the archives and find a lot of information he didn't know was there. But he also noted that somewhere in the 1600s, a Black person who'd been educated in the Netherlands and medicine came to the United States and practiced medicine. And that's much earlier. And when I find that link and that article, I will send it to you.
I'm very interested. I hope you will find it and throw it in the chat box for me to look at. That would be great.
No, it's on my computer, so I have to wait until after this is over and I'll go find it and send it to you.
Oh, no. Okay. Well, I can be patient.
Thank you.
If I were going to write a book about Dr. Woodson, I would probably posit that his ideas about the importance of teaching Negro, what he called Negro history, are born, or at least the germ of that idea is born in the actual Philippines. He's in the Philippines from 1907 to 1911. And in 1912, he enters Harvard to begin study for his PhD in history. And he completes that coursework in 2 years. And Harvard has this strange system where, so I had gone to Smith prior to Harvard, and at Smith, you took your exams prior to winter break. And then if you could afford to, you went home for winter break. At Harvard, it's the opposite. So you go on winter break and then you come back and you take your exams. It's terrible because it means your entire winter break is fraught. And during my winter break, I was writing papers. So it's not actually a break. While your friends are having fun, you are working. So this is the system. They don't change systems at Harvard, I can tell you that much. This was the system that Carter G. Woodson faced, and he wanted to leave. He was finished studying and he wanted to leave and not have to come back, right? He didn't want to have to come back for exams. And this is the thing you do if you have no money. If you're broke, you're like, no, I'm not gonna leave and then come back to take my exams. So he asked Harvard for permission to take his exams early. And Harvard, being very, very flexible, said, oh no, you cannot. Absolutely not. But the audacity of someone who says, you know what? Hey, professor, do you think I could get that exam early? Let me tell you something. There was no day in my life where I considered going up to my professor and saying, can I take this exam early? I wanted them to not even notice me before exams. But that was his confidence, was like, yep, let me just get this done and then I'll be on my way. He did have to come back for his exams, unfortunately. He also asked Harvard if they thought there could be like a Negro history. And they laughed him to scorn and said, Negroes have no history. And so I think that's a funny statement, because it seems to me like if you walk from over there to over here, then your history was you walked from over there to over here. You have some history, even if the history is not noteworthy. But they said Negroes have no history, so there wouldn't be anything to study. And of course, Carter G. Woodson would go on to spend his life making sure that everyone understood that African people have history. And a lot of people have told that story about Harvard denying the fact that African people have a history. It's such a strange claim to make, but that is the claim. I'm so thankful to Dr. Woodson. He started what was then called the Journal of Negro History. And when I think about that, I think about the fact that he was thinking about the future. This is a journal he started in 1915. And it has articles and interesting information about Black people. And it's a journal that still exists today. It's renamed the Journal of African American History. And his contribution, at least to my life, is such that when I get to school at Smith College and I need to look up an article or look up information about African American people, I could go to the Nielsen Library and find volumes and volumes of this Journal of African American. what he did was he supplied all of the people, all of the Black people going to college, and white people. I mean, white people use the Journal of African American History as well. He supplied all of us with the means to counter that argument. There's no way that a professor can say there's no such thing as Negro history if there is an entire 500 volume set of something called the Journal of African American. So he makes the argument moot by starting it. And when I show up to college, I never even question it. Of course, there's going to be a Journal of African American History and a Journal of African American Sociology and a Journal of African American everything. But he started that journal in 1915. So if you ever referred to that or looked it up, that is Carter G. Woodson. Yes, some history, exactly. You know he did that to spite Harvard. And I also think it's a very Harvardian sort of argument, right? If there's no Negro history, what is this journal doing here? How come there's all these volumes of this stuff? It's not a blank journal. So he wins the argument by starting it. Let's see if I've gotten through all of the information I wanted to get through. Oh, one of my favorites. So also, I think it was in 1915 also that he started, Carter G. Woodson that is, started the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. And when you saw the video of him, that was the offices of the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History in Washington, D.C. That was his offices. And this association sort of served as a clearinghouse. And what it did was it collected information from around the country, and it also sent out information to people who were requesting it so that you could disseminate these materials. Because people are there's no belief in an African American or a Negro history. So he has to send the materials to people so that they know this information is out there. And he did this for free. So you could write the Association for the Study of Negro History, and he would send you information for free. And so, that is his means of making sure that people would get the information out there. When you start something, it's free, and then therefore people don't have an excuse for not having it because all you had to do was write to him. He had subscriptions to the association. And so there were different levels of subscription that you could pay if you wanted to be a supporting member. But if you wanted information, he would send it to you for free. Langston Hughes worked there while he was in college at Howard. And it's interesting because I've read this story both in the biography of Langston Hughes and in the biographies of Carter G. Woodson. And if ever there were two personalities that were different, diametrically opposed, it was Carter G. Woodson and Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes loved to have a good time, and he's a poet, and he loves words and enjoys people. And Carter G. Woodson is the opposite of all of those things. He's disciplined and a workhorse, and he was never known to take recreation and never played a rap. And so Carter G. Woodson would fly all over the country to give lectures and talks. And he had assigned his mentees to do some work collecting information. I think it was collecting information about freed Africans during slavery. Anyway, they were supposed to compile this information. And so he goes off and he comes back to his offices and he finds Langston Hughes and his other workers playing cards. And I was like, uh-oh, this is it. Langston's about to get it. He's about to be spanked. It's going to be over for Langston. And I understood just how broke Langston Hughes was at that time. He had no money. So this was not something that he needed to be doing, messing around playing cards, not at all. So I was like, oh no, Langston Hughes about to be homeless again. And so I thought, of course, that Carter G. Woodson would fire him, and he doesn't. And so he does have the ability to have some largesse sometimes, but many people who worked for him said he was a difficult personality to work for. Think about this phrase, he was not known to take recreation. So the people who were closest to him said he did not play around. And that was his contribution to us. He spent the 75 years of his life compiling this information and making it so that people would think that there was such a thing as Negro history. Like, that was his entire purpose. It was not an accident. He took a vow of poverty. He chose not to marry in order to carry out this work. So he had choices. He could have married. He said, no, I have the unique capacity to do this thing. And this is the thing that I'm going to do. And he was a coal miner. So he had the constitution, the physical constitution and strength to be able to work, 18 hours a day. And this is what he did. We're at 7:57 now. Any questions now? Because I can go all day.
Ebonee, I have a question for you. How has your investigation and learning about Dr. Woodson influenced how you approach your own work?
That's a good question. I don't know. What I know is I'm incredibly grateful for his sacrifice. It's an enormous sacrifice that he did, and he was not well liked. And the thing that we right now in 2021 don't understand is that Black people at that time also did not believe there was a Negro history. That is why he ends up writing The Miseducation of the Negro, because Black people have also bought the lie that we don't have a history. So yeah, so this whole idea of you can educate yourself and you can get a degree in African American studies or Africana studies, or you can get a degree in Asian American studies or Indigenous studies, all of these things will come along because of Carter G. Woodson. If you have one of those degrees, it's because of Carter G. Woodson. He thought of this idea, we're gonna create this information, it's going to be a course and people are going to learn about Negro history. How did it become a month, someone asked? Good question. So within his lifetime, the week, which was meant to celebrate the achievements of his students during the course of the year, was made into a month. And people began to cram into that month everything that they knew about Black history. He was already railing against that in his lifetime. In his lifetime. Let's see if I can quickly find that slide. I'll show it to you. Okay, here's the slide. How am I going to show it now? This is like the last slide in the entire presentation, but these are Dr. Woodson's own words. Do not wait until the last moment to prepare for Negro History Week. The time is nigh at hand. Secure the necessary literature at once and begin to plan immediately to demonstrate to the community what you and your coworkers have learned about the Negro during the year. So it's clear from that statement that he envisioned that Negro History Week would celebrate what you had learned during the year. And the fact that it was made into a month, it's neither here nor there, because he still felt that you should be learning throughout the course of the entire year. And then you have his for free literature right to the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History at his offices on 9th Street. Let's see. Oh yeah, I just answered, how did it become a month? It's 8:02. Should I keep going? People are like,
Ebony, people are really enjoying the content that you're presenting. So if you want to go a little bit longer, I think everybody would enjoy that.
Well, we'll see. we will see. Let me see if I can get out of this screen. I was giving this talk not very long ago, and someone asked me if I thought that Carter G. Woodson would be content to end his project now. Like, do we still need Black History Month? And so I was taken aback because it never occurred to me that the project could be over. I think of Dr. Woodson as having a very definite purpose for his project. And so that is sort of part 2 of this presentation, which I'll try to get through very quickly. It's why do we have a Black History Month? Why do we need Black history? Why can't it just be incorporated into the history with everyone else? Which is what he actually did believe, but it just wasn't happening. And so the part 2 of the presentation is why do we need it still I think Dr. Woodson would be like, yeah, we definitely still need it, but here's my answer to the why. So this is a flag. A man was lynched yesterday that was hung outside of the headquarters of the NAACP in New York. It was outside of those offices from 1920 to 1938. So this is W.E.B. Du Bois's project. He was one of the original founders along with several other people. And consider that for 18 years, the NAACP felt that this would be true every day for 18 years. And they did not take this flag down because they felt that Black men had stopped being lynched. They took it down because their landlord threatened to evict them if they didn't. So that's sort of the time that Carter G. Woodson is living in, that this was the reality of Black life. Like, lynchings were commonplace. And this statement is one that I found recently. So he is writing about the importance of the study of history. And this is what he said in 1933. If a race has no history, if it has no worthwhile tradition, it becomes a negligible factor in the thought of the world, and it stands in danger of being exterminated. The picture obviously is not associated with the quote, but it was written in 1933. So I thought about that immediately with what was happening in Europe in 1933. And of course, Hitler is coming to power then. So I don't know if Carter G. Woodson is referencing that or not, but I know that he thought of his history project as a way of protecting Black lives. I don't think he thought of this as simply a nice thing that we should talk about. I think he thought of this as a life-saving measure for Black people. So that's why I'm like, well, I don't think he thinks the project is over, because I don't think he would think that our lives have become valuable enough yet that we could give up the project. You'll remember that a very prominent person spoke these words about African countries. He was referring to immigrants, and he wanted people from Norway to come. And he asked this question. So that was very, very recently. So I think if Dr. Woodson knew that someone who held the office of president had made this statement, he would say, oh, no, my project is not over yet. Not if someone could make a statement like that. The photo on the left is by artist Dred Scott. And this hangs outside of a gallery. I believe the gallery is in New York. I need to look at that again. But he did this flag, a man was lynched by police yesterday. And I think there are probably a lot of Black people who are like, yes, all of these extrajudicial killings of Black men by police they amount to lynchings. I certainly see it that way, particularly with the case of Eric Garner, who was killed in that chokehold. So I think if Woodson were alive today and he were looking at all of these things, he would say, oh no, we're not finished with this project, not yet. I don't see it coming to an end, not yet. There was a second purpose for the study of Black history for Dr. Woodson. And his second purpose is something like this. Those with ambitions in the present will thus gain renewed vigor in their efforts to battle with present day obstacles and finally overcome in the struggle of life. So here he's saying if Black people in particular read about history and what their ancestors went through, they'll be inspired to keep going with whatever they're struggling with. So he meant for it to be an inspiration to people living in the present. Here he is again, those who have no record of what their forebears have lose the inspiration which comes from the teaching of biography and history. And so he meant for Negro history to be a source of upliftment to people who have fallen. He really did. And here is another talking point for you. Who said the following? Carter G. Woodson's Negro History opened my eyes about the empires before the Black slave was brought to the United States and the early Negro struggles for freedom. I'll temporarily stop my share while you guys think of who might have made that statement. And I'll read it again. Carter G. Woodson's Negro History opened my eyes about the empires before the Black slave was brought to the United States and the early Negro struggles for freedom. Oh, we got some guesses. We got, okay, look at that. There were people guessing all along. So we had a guess of Jay-Z, James Baldwin. I love that answer. Jimmy Carter, Muhammad Ali, Dr. King, Malcolm X, Jimmy Carter, Elijah Muhammad, MLK, John Lewis. A lot of people have put brilliant guesses in, and there is a right answer. The right answer is Damien Adia. Malcolm X said that, right? You guys can see it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So here's more of Malcolm X. Of all our studies, history is best qualified to reward our research. And when you see that you've got problems, all you have to do is examine the historic method used all over the world by others who have problems similar to yours. And once you see how they got theirs straight, then you know how you can get yours straight. And there is probably no more MalcolmXian quote than that one right there. So if you guys have read the autobiography of Malcolm X, then you know he starts studying about Negro history when he's in jail. So really the lowest point in his life. And in 1950, when Carter G. Woodson dies, Malcolm X is just becoming a minister of the Nation of Islam. So he doesn't get to see the effect, the transformative effect that learning about Negro history will have on Malcolm X. And then I was so pleased when I found this quote. People don't realize how a man's whole life can be changed by one book. And so those were the two, I would say, major initiatives that Carter G. Woodson, what do I want to say, devoted his entire life to. One, giving people a history so that the idea that they could be exterminated or were worth less would be invalidated, and two, that it would uplift people and transform them. Then we got a question in the chat. How effective is the Black Lives Matter movement? I would effective because it's brought to everyone's attention of this idea of these, I don't know, I wish people would call them extrajudicial killings, because the police officers who are arresting these Black men and who are murdering them, they become judge, juror, and executioner. So what crime they committed is irrelevant to me. It does not matter, because someone can take your life because they think you committed a crime, right? So I think that bringing this matter to the attention of everyone, the fact that everybody knows what the Black Lives Matter movement is, all of that is an amazing effort. All the Black people that I have seen, all the articles have said Black people are super worried that we'll lose focus and all of this attention will dissipate and we'll lose energy and people will go back to doing things the way they were. And so far, I would say that hasn't yet happened, but you never know. Americans can be fickle people. We could be a fickle people. So I hope that we will maintain our focus and intent on reforming police actions. All right, we got to 8:13.
You guys, if you have questions for Ebonee, please raise your hand or put them in the chat.
Adrian raised their hand.
It's Bernadette again.
It's Bernadette.
Given the premise that starts Black History Week, do you think that it has somehow failed if in fact our focus is not on learning our history during Black History Month, every single day of it, not only individually, but demanding that it be taught in our schools during that month? The impact on science and math and medicine and literature and everything else. And instead it's just seen as sort of a celebration, but it doesn't have the same learning connection attached to it.
That's right. Here's what I will say. I think Dr. Woodson would be very disappointed because we've consigned ourselves to this one arbitrary month when what he meant was that we should devote our entire lives. And if you saw that quote, it was to adults, like, go out and tell your community what you have learned during not just kids. He didn't just intend for kids to be learning this in school, but that Black adults should be informing the rest of the community about all of the things that they had learned during the course of the year. So I already know that he was angry even when he died. And I also think if there's no other month when you're gonna study Black history, then let February be it. I mean, if that's all the more Black history you can possibly, find palatable, then yeah, I'm gonna take February because that's all that's being offered. But I think he would say that's an arbitrary limitation, right? Arbitrary limitation. You made that up.
Do you think he ever contemplated the need to educate white people? Definitely we had to start with ourselves, but did he ever discuss that as well?
Oh yeah. So when he was flying around the country giving his talks about Negro history, his audiences were mixed. He talked to white audiences, Black audiences, mixed audience. He went wherever he was asked to go. And he did him. He was very well learned in his subject. So you could expect to be educated if you went to a lecture by Dr. Woodson and be pleased with the result. That's my understanding. Nobody that I know of walked away and said, oh, I didn't learn something. The people that he had, his African-American mentees, the men that he had working in the offices, even some of them questioned the need for a Negro history. So it was just a monumental effort to get people to realize, okay, this is an important thing. We need to do it. We need to do it all the time.
And how many books did he actually write? Do you know?
I don't know. So he wrote 1, 2, 3. I can easily name 3. I'm gonna guess about 10. He wrote about the Civil War veterans. So when he was working in the coal mines, the people that were working with him had been enslaved. And one of the things that he would do is read to them, because a lot of them were illiterate. Not saying not smart, they're illiterate, and they would ask him to read the papers and stuff for them. And in exchange, they would give him their stories. So one of the books that he wrote was these recollections of these Black Civil War vets that he had worked with. So a lot of priceless material. He wrote a book about Black migration prior to 1901, I think it was. And so that is basically The Warmth of Other Suns, but done 100 years, looking at the 100 years before. But he just set it all out there for us to find, and he's like, okay, he had faith that people were going to pick up his project and go with it. How can we convince our local school boards to approve of books that teach actual Black history? This is the good question. And it's not a question that I have an easy answer to. What I would say is, okay, can we give this presentation to our school boards? Can we present this information to the school board so that they know? Someone asked, is Carter Woodson responsible for the Black Encyclopedia type history of African Americans written in the late 30s? I'm not sure what's being referred to there. So I don't know that answer.
Ebonee, I have my hand up. Grace Growing Medicine.
Oh, yes, Grace Growing Medicine.
Hi, it's good seeing you again. Long time, no see. There was a very brief indication that something about Native Americans and Blacks. Did he ever, did he mix with, did he write anything about Native American?
Not anything good.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
because there was that little bit, and I wonder what that's about, and if he had written.
So that, when you were looking at the quotation, in contrast to Indians, Black people had greater immunity, that was not Carter G. Woodson. That is the kind of statement that you might find in a modern textbook that is telling you about the preference for West Africans over Native Americans. He didn't have anything good to say about Native Americans, unfortunately. So he kept his project just to African Americans, and what contributions Native Americans made, I don't think he cared, and he didn't think it was important. So definitely has definitely big blinders. You'll remember that I said he's an arrogant man. He's got blinders on around this.
Yes, yes. I was just curious about that. Well, he was wrong.
Yes.
Thanks. I'm so good to see you, and thanks for your presentation.
No problem. Someone said I might have missed it. Did you say why he spent time in the Philippines? There was this American idea at the time that if you could make the Filipino peasantry like American things, then it would be easier to subdue the revolutionaries within its ranks. This policy was called the policy of attraction, okay? And sent to the Philippines as a part of the policy of attraction. He did not believe in this policy. That's not what I'm trying to say. He wasn't like, yes, go America. That's not it. He was teaching school children how to read. So I do think of him as as a less dangerous part of the policy of attraction, which was ultimately successful. What do I think of the 1619 project? So many things flooded through my head as soon as you said that. I think it's brilliant, of course. There's so much for us to learn from the colonial America. Like I think that would be the next part of this presentation. We would be looking at colonial thoughts about African people. And the curriculum developed from it. I haven't had a chance to go through the curriculum. I have had a chance, you can go online. There are actual video presentations of, is it Nicole Hannah-Jones? I can't remember whether it's Nicole Hannah-Jones or Hannah Nicole Jones, but she is the one who started this project at the New York Times. And she got together a bunch of artists when the project was launched. And there's just a brilliant amount of work. Poets spoke, and amazing things happened as a result of that project. So of course I love this. Maybe he had nothing good to say about the Native Americans because 5 tribes owned slaves. I have no idea. I need to do some research and figure out what his problem with the Native American population was, but he definitely was anti-Native American. In addition to what John Barber suggested, local school boards need to be pressured to teach Black history and about Native Americans. The problem is we just need to tell the truth. That's the bottom.
Honest history. Yeah.
We just need to tell the truth. None of these.
I had a question. What do you think of the 1619 project?
I did just talk about that. So
I love that. Yeah.
I love the 1619 project and all of the things that came after it, that grew out of it. So there's actually, let me see if I can quickly find some of the videos that came out of that project. So yeah, there's live events of this. I don't know which one I was watching, but I was so impressed with the poetry that came about. This might be it, I don't know. We'll see. But you don't really need me to go and Google things, but the art that it spawned. I haven't really looked at the curriculum, but I imagine it would be amazing, as the project itself was an amazing one. Okay, what am I looking for? It's all right. All right. So it's 8:24. I have 5 very easy questions to end this night, and I'll let you guys be on with the rest of your evening. So let me find those. I'll ask them. You guys will get them right. Everyone will be made happy. All righty. I'm gonna share my screen with you guys again. True or false? Dr. Woodson got his idea about the importance of teaching culturally relevant material by teaching African children early in his career. Anyone think that's true, or anyone know that to be false at this point?
Mostly false, mostly false votes here.
Yes. So he got his start in the Philippines. So I just wanted to make sure to point that out. Carter G. Woodson was able to convince Harvard of the importance of Negro history. I mean, everybody could just shout that out. No, they were they were unconvinced that such a thing existed. And I see everybody saying false. Yeah, no, they were unconvinced. Carter G. Woodson liked the idea of studying Black history solely during the month of February. Oh my gosh.
Everybody knows that's false.
Right? Yeah. Hell no. Carter G. Woodson fired Langston Hughes after he caught Hughes playing cards instead of working.
False.
Exactly. I was surprised at that one. He was a demanding person, but he did not fire Langston. Here's an interesting one. Carter G. Woodson could not get along with anyone, not even children. I didn't go over this one, so you guys will have to give a guess.
I would say false.
Yeah, he did not get along with very many people.
Oh.
There were few people that he could get along with.
Oh.
but he could get along with children. Children loved him. He
Oh,
would share stories with them and give them little things to act out and skits. He was always educating them. He would buy all the children in his neighborhood ice cream cones. Adults could not get along with Carter G. Woodson, not even his mentees that he had at the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History could get along with him. W.E.B. Du Bois couldn't get along with him, but children could. He has a difficult personality. He's not an easy guy to like. Friends, it is now 8:27, and someone said, saying something in the chat box, he wouldn't have gotten along with me as a child. Yeah, well, believable. He was a very interesting personality and arrogant too. So, but now you know a little bit more about why he did some of the things he did and great sacrifices he made and some of his contributions to our modern life.
And there's a question about whether he ever visited Africa.
He did. So although his mentee said I did not know him to take recreation, he traveled to Europe and he traveled to Africa. Mm-hmm.
Friends, I think we will wind up our meeting. So huge thank you to everybody for coming this evening, and a deep gratitude to Ebonee for putting all of this together and sharing this wonderful information with us this evening. We do these just about every month, so please stay tuned for our April event. And again, thank you to everybody who contributes to us. That helps us to cover the costs of having these events. So again, thank you. And this recording, we hope to have it available on our YouTube channel just as soon as we can. So please be patient for that and check your email for when that's been posted. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a good evening.
Thank you all for coming.